Okay, guys, Mark Dawes here. This is hot off the press. You can see it from the Health and Safety Executive. Private security firm sentenced after employee attacked at a youth offender training centre. Again, dated 22nd of June 2021. And it states here, a private security company has been fined after an employee suffered life-changing injuries when he was assaulted by 4 individuals at a young offenders training facility in Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes Magistrates Court heard how on the 15th of March 2017, the secure care officer was working alone with a group of 6 trainees who were taking part in a scheduled activity on the outdoor fence football pitch at the Oak Hill Secure Training Centre in Milton Keynes. The SCO had only worked for the company for around 3 or 4 months. During the activity, one of the individuals attempted to climb the fence. The incident escalated and the SCO attempted to deal with it alone. The situation became hostile and he was attacked by 4 of the individuals. The SCO sustained multiple injuries to his head and body and was taken to hospital by ambulance, where he was put in an induced coma for 3 weeks. He suffered brain damage and had a plate fitted in his skull. He spent a further 2 months in a specialist brain injury rehabilitation centre. He said, "When I came around from the coma, I could not walk without assistance and I would sleep for around 17 hours a day. I was on medication for about a year. This was mainly to prevent epilepsy, which is common following brain injury." He added, "I have a scar and an indentation on my head. This means people always ask me about what happened. I do not like talking about this to people. Even now I struggle to form relationships with people as I find it difficult to trust people. I struggle to read and understand things. I have been referred to a neuropsychologist." An investigation by the Health and Safety Executive found that G4S Care and Justice Services UK Limited failed to ensure robust procedures were put in place to ensure that inexperienced staff were not working alone with groups of young people who presented a high risk of violence. G4S Care and Justice Services UK Limited pleaded guilty to breaching Section 2.1 and Section 33.1a of the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. They were fined £250,000 in order to pay costs of £13,787. Speaking after the hearing, the HSE Inspector Stephen Faulkner said, "If proper procedures and supervision had been put in place to prevent inexperienced officers from working alone in high-risk situations, the life-changing injuries sustained by the employer could have been prevented." And Thames Valley Police carried out separate criminal investigations against 4 individuals involved in the assault. Now, we've been banging on about this for years, primarily to do with single-person restraint, because that's a field we specialise in. And still today, we get people teaching single-person restraint or being expected to restrain on their own. And the argument for that is, there's not enough staff. Well, it's a lone working activity, and if those staff are not experienced in restraining, then there's an even greater risk. But as Sir Herbert Laming said years ago, you should not be expected to restrain on your own when he was the Chief Inspector of Social Services Inspectorate. We still have single-person doors. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but if provided there's no risk. But when licensing agencies work out how many door staff are actually required on a door, that's worked out on a capacity model. It's not factoring in the risk of violence. So if there's a risk of violence, you shouldn't have single-person doors. It's a lone working activity. And we still have staff working in isolation. So working in isolation or working alone away from your colleagues, even in the same building, is a lone working activity. And we have security officers, teachers, social workers, etc., all working on their own. And in the past, we've had the case of Jenny Morrison, who was a social worker, who visited a mental health patient in the community on her own, and she was stabbed to death. She was stabbed over 100 times, as was Ashley Ewing, another mental health worker, who was stabbed to death by a patient she visited in the community. And the worst thing about these cases was it was foreseeable. But the fact of the matter is we should not be expecting staff to work alone in situations where there are a foreseeable risk of violence. And going back to this case in question, someone suffered life-changing injuries as a result of being put in a position where this inexperienced member of staff was on their own. It was a lone working activity, and their life will never be the same again. And for me, we still get companies today. I had a conversation with a school only last week who's saying, will you teach us how to restrain on our own? No, I won't. Well, other companies do. That's great. Other companies can go and do that. I personally think if you're teaching staff to restrain, there's obviously a risk because you're asking them to take hold of another human being, be that an adult or be that a child. And for the member of staff, you're putting that if they're restraining a child on their own, then you're increasing the risk of allegations. And if an allegation is made and an investigation is carried out, be it a flawed investigation, a member of staff can have their name put on a list for life, by a recommendation from a manager. It doesn't even have to go to a formal tribunal or court. There's another risk there. And I think the training company should stop teaching people to restrain on their own just to get the business. It's, in my opinion, negligence. It really is. It's willful neglect. Shouldn't be done. Anyway, hope that helps. Have a great day, and I'll speak to you all again soon.